so that folks coming in know what session this is. I know many of you have probably been to so many already today. Let's go ahead and start.
Yes, I'm ready.
Perfect, thank you, Elilta. So I am not able to see the chat while I am speaking, and so maybe Darice, if you can kind of let me know if there's anything in particular that's coming up in there. But we just want to welcome everybody to this session, Helping Students in Distress. We are so grateful to have you. I know that back to the Bay, there's so many great things going on, and we appreciate you choosing this workshop. We look forward to giving you a lot of great information. So just to introduce ourselves, we'll go down our presenter list. My name is Shauna Olson. I'm the Director of Counseling Services at Student Health and Counseling here at East Bay.
My name is Darice Ingram. I'm with the Pioneers for Hope Program Coordinator here at CASA East Bay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, sorry, Lorraine, go ahead.
That's okay. My name is Lorriane Holmes. I'm the confidential advocate on campus.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elilta Tewelde, and I'm the care case manager on campus.
Okay, great. So we have a powerful team joining us today to tell you all about a lot of great services that we have at East Bay. We're expecting that there will be a lot of folks joining this session, and so usually we go around and ask like what people are most interested in hearing about. Let me start by just saying here's what we were going to cover, and then maybe if there's additional things, folks can put that into the chat, and Darice can read them out for us. So we were going to talk about the care team, which came up in, has come up a lot. I think was coming up a little bit in the keynote this morning, and so Elilta is going to tell us a little bit about the care team process, what the care team is and what we do. And then I'm going to go over some basic techniques for connecting with students, especially in this remote environment. And then ways to kind of assess if somebody is in a heightened level of distress. And then we'll talk about each of our programs and resources and how you can connect students with the appropriate resource for them if you're finding that there are things that, that are concerning and that are more than you want to handle and you need to use some of the other resources on campus. So go ahead and put into the chat if there are other particular concerns you have or issues that you were hoping that we could cover during this time, and we'll do our best to cover everything we can. And that will be how we'll do introductions. And feel free to put also in the chat just who you are, where you're coming from, just to introduce yourself to the group. But I'm going to pass it over to Elilta to start telling us a little bit about our care team structure.
All right, again, good afternoon, everyone. So based on the slide that we have here, the care team consists of the Associate Vice Presidents of Student Affairs, Associate Deans, myself, the case manager, counseling, AS, student conduct, housing, and risk management. So as you can see here, we have pretty much an array of departments. So we can have each department be able to be a part of the assessment that we do during our care team meetings. And the way the process works is on the website for the student care team, you can go on there and it's specific to each group. So staff and faculty has one page where they can report a case if there's any issues that they're having with a student, or if they see that a student is facing some challenges. And then there's also one for a parent or any family member or a community member. And then there's also one for the student itself, where you could actually, the student can themselves put in a report if it's something about themselves where they need help, or if they see that a student or another peer seems like they may need some assistance, some further assistance. So it's broken up in those three categories. And then also on my page, under the advocacy services page, you can also make a report on there as well. There's a link that says make a report. So the way that works is once the report is submitted, the associate vice presidents, we have two, Martine and Andrea, they review it, and then they assign it to the appropriate areas based on what the needs of the student is. And then after those reports are assigned, the individuals will review it, and then we'll do an outreach. Sometimes we'll do an outreach to the person that reported it. So it could be a professor, a staff member, a parent, and then we'll reach out to let them know that we received the report, and now we're in the process of, you know, just taking the necessary steps to figure out what the best steps are to contact not only the student, but just to figure out a way that we can assist the entire matter. And then during that time, if we are able to contact the student, once we assess what the issue is, we offer resources, and those resources can be either on campus or off campus or both. And we assist the students in navigating through that process, because sometimes there are students on campus who are not familiar with certain resources on campus as well as off campus. And the care team meets every 2 weeks. And what we do is, as a team, we'll review the case, and then we'll look at everything from the student's grade point average. If the student has missed a lot of classes, there's a database system that shows if they've met with their advisors or if they met with their professors, because they are also able to put in notes. And so we're able to look at it from a more clearer view, if you might say so myself, where it's not just coming from one individual, but allows us to see, you know, is the student participating, or is the student just completely removed him or herself or themselves from just campus activities or just any schoolwork. And so from there, we'll talk about what the next action plan is going to be. And then when we have our next meeting, we do a follow-up just to see, you know, what if there's been any resolution to these cases. And sometimes the cases do go on for quite some time, and then others we're able to close them out if we see that the student was able to receive all of the services that they needed. And just to keep in mind, everything is confidential. So if you are someone who is to make a report, you can make yourself anonymous. And if you need to get some information about, like, a follow-up about the student, we can give some basic information, but we, you know, just keep in mind that it's confidential. So there's certain things that we wouldn't be able to share, just, you know, just for certain laws in terms of HIPAA. So, so that's pretty much like the scope of it. It's a very, we offer wraparound services, and then myself as the case manager, I do a lot of follow-ups with students who may be needing a little bit more extra support. And so I'll set up individual plans with the student to make sure that they successfully complete their year or their semester on campus.
Elilta, we had a question in the chat about how many times you follow up. And then Shauna, can we turn on the captions?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
How many times do we follow up with the student? Is that the question?
Yes, before the case is moved to, like, monitored or closed.
We typically, so what we do is we'll send an email, we'll do a phone call. We typically do it at least, I would say, about 2 to 3 times. And then after a certain point, if we see that we're not receiving any feedback from the student, that's when we also, we reach out to their advisor or their professor. And then if there's a point where the student is not following up, then we do have to close it. But typically that's about 2 to 3 times in terms of follow-up. But there's not, it's also, I would say it's all case by case.
I think that's all the questions in the chat.
Perfect. And I shared my computer sound, and so I was hoping that it would caption for all of us, but it looks like it's just doing it for me. I apologize. So if anybody else on here knows how to make sure the captions work for everybody, please
It's captioning for us, Shauna.
I think it's just captioning for what I'm saying.
Yes.
So unfortunately, my words will be powerfully recorded. Everyone else's will be lost. So let me know if anybody on this call knows how to fix that. I did share my computer sound, and I thought that would make it work. Great. Any other questions for Elilta about our care team?
There was one additional question about availability to graduate students. and I'm not sure if that means the presentation or the care team process. So if,
Yeah.
Ailey, if you just want to confirm, but all of the services are available to all students.
Yes, that is true. And I believe that these are going to be recorded, and I assume that they would also be available. The sessions would also be, the recordings would also be available to all students. Great questions. Okay. Perfect. So we will continue to refer to the care team throughout throughout this session, but please feel free to ask other questions as we go. All right, so we thought that we would start by just talking about general skills in terms of engaging with students, especially as we're operating largely remotely. And then we'll get into particular instances of students in distress. When we do a longer presentation, that's an hour and a half, we have scenarios that we talk through or solicit scenarios from our participants. I'm not sure we'll have time to do that today, but we will do our best. So just some general tips from us about engaging with students. So the first thing is when a student is distressed, they may present as very agitated and angry. They may present as very shut down, but in whatever situation, we often as faculty and staff have a reaction to how the student is presenting. And so the first step is just to stay calm, to know that you're also becoming distressed and agitated does not help the situation or the student. So as you're listening to their story, as they're presenting in whatever way they are, take a breath and just acknowledge, yes, these situations can feel intense to the students and also to us who are trying to support them. Try not to further escalate any conflicts with your own emotional response, but as much as possible, put your feelings aside so that you have space to attend to the student and know that you can kind of take care of yourself or debrief with somebody after the interaction. And also try not to take whatever's happening personally, even if they are demanding something from you in particular, but just remind yourself that this is a whole situation that the student is dealing with and their reaction to it is probably based on a lot more than just your personal piece of it or your interaction with them. The next thing we recommend is to be clear about your limits and what is your role in the situation. So whether that is your professional role with the student, I am your instructor, I am your advisor, whatever that would be, or also your personal boundaries. And this might be different for all of us, and we don't have to be judgmental about this, but some people are much more willing and able and even welcoming of more of a relationship, emotional connection, kind of getting to know the student on a personal level. For other people, that is not what they're looking for in their interaction with the student. And so whatever your boundary is, that's okay. But just know what that is for you and be willing to communicate that with the student so that they have a heads up and they're not surprised or expecting something that you're not able to give to them. And the last thing is to communicate really clearly about your reporting obligations. So what are kind of the safety issues or the things that you would need to report to other people versus what are the things that you can keep just between you and the student. And it's really helpful to do this before you get into a situation where you need to report, for example, a Title IX situation. So as soon as you get a little whiff of like, there could be a safety issue here in terms of the student has been abused or the student might be a danger to themselves or a danger to someone else, to just jump in and say, I'm so glad you're telling me this, and I just want to make sure that we're really clear because of my role on the campus and our commitment to keeping everybody safe. There are certain situations that I need to check in with other people about just to make sure you're okay and everybody on our campus is okay. And so here's what those situations are. And if you want to ask me about that before we speak any more about the situation, feel free to ask me questions, because often students will want to kind of check out, well, if somebody were to say this, what would you have to do? And so let them run through some scenarios like that so that they feel like they are empowered to have all the information and make sure that they can make an informed decision about what they want to disclose to you and what they might choose not to disclose to you. And this is also a good moment to say there are some people that don't need to report, to Title IX, for example. The Counseling Center and Lorriane are, it's in her title of confidential advocate. And so to say, if you want to share information about that kind of thing and you're not ready for it to be reported to Title IX, these are the people that you can talk to. Lorriane, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about confidentiality at this point.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit more specifically when I'm talking about sexual violence and domestic violence, but I concur with everything you just said.
Perfect, thanks, Lorraine. All right. The next point is to keep a compassionate perspective, and that means whatever is coming at you in whatever way it's coming at you, try and stay focused on the student and kind of put yourself in their shoes and imagine from their perspective what's going on. And so if you were in their same situation, might make very different choices or never put yourself in whatever situation they might find themselves. And yet it's not helpful to judge it and just say, I don't know what's going on with this student, but to say, whatever's going on for them, whatever decisions they might be making, it makes sense to the student in some way. So let me try and put myself in their shoes and understand, if I were in the same situation, or if this was the best choice that I felt like I had before me, what would that be like? And see it from their perspective. If it's a situation that you've never experienced, try not to judge it or make assumptions about it, but just be open to listening to what is the student's experience of the situation. Because again, whatever choices they're making makes sense to them on some level. And then also don't minimize their experience and say, oh, you'll forget about this next week, and make assumptions based on your own experience, but just know that they're going through something that matters to them and they want that to be attended to, and they want to know that that's important to other people in the same way that's important to them. So make sure that you don't dismiss their distress about whatever they're going through. And then the last thing is to assume positive intent. So it doesn't help anybody if you're feeling like you're being manipulated or they're making up a story just to kind of get something from you, get you to change their grade or get you to excuse a late homework, whatever it is. It doesn't help the situation if you come in with that mindset and you're kind of suspicious of them. So they can sense that that's the case, and that really will impact the relationship and the dynamic between you. So as much as possible, assume positive intent, try and take the students at their word, and don't go down that rabbit hole of like, I'm suspicious, I don't think this story is checking out, but just kind of take it at face value. Any questions at this point that folks have or that are in the chat, Darice?
Shauna, yes, there was one about, does the university have a list of confidential versus non-confidential resources for students? And then one tip was to take out your earphones, and that may share the chat. That may share the captioning amongst all of us.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, Darice, do you want to try and say something and see?
Okay, I'm going to say something and see, and no.
Thank you for that tip. We'll see if it maybe works in the future. All right, so in terms of confidential resources, it's a very short list. It really is just the counselors and Lorraine. So we don't need to report to Title IX. We do report if somebody is an imminent danger to themselves or to others. We still need to report that and make sure that they're safe. So that's kind of that easy list.
And still noted the change in the captionings are picking up other people. So that's great.
Excellent.
Thanks, Lil.
Thank you so much. Perfect. Okay. So we'll go to our next slide, which are just some basic active listening skills. And these are, things that I even as a counselor in the field for, I don't even want to tell you how many years, I fall back on these every day. And so these are very basic skills, but super, super useful. So the first one is to use reflective listening. And that's basically like mirroring back, here's what I hear you saying. And that shows the student that you're listening to them and that what they say matters to you. And it also checks to make sure that you are understanding them correctly. Because you could say, I hear you saying that you're really mad. And they could be like, no, I'm not mad. I'm super disappointed. And then you're like, oh, you're disappointed. Great. Tell me more about that. So it kind of keeps your conversation on the right track. The next thing is to validate. And so just again, as you're putting yourself in the student's shoes, to think about, are there pieces of this that you can understand, pieces of this that you can affirm of like, yes, I feel like any student in your shoes would be feeling the same way. What are the things that you can validate back to them that help them know they're not crazy, they're not wrong for having this reaction? And the next thing is asking open-ended questions. And of course, this is if you are in an environment where you have some time to talk, but just kind of eliciting more information and hearing more of their story by asking questions like, so how was that for you? How's the class going? As opposed to, the class is going good, right? which kind of shuts down the conversation. So thinking of it as a tennis match where you're hitting the ball to them and hoping that they'll hit it back to you by giving more information. And throughout all of these active listening skills, resist the urge to problem solve immediately. And I know that's difficult, especially for those who have been on campus a long time or have been teaching a long time and feel like I've heard this before, and so let's move it along. Like I know what to do, so I'm just going to tell you. Every student's story is unique and every student's struggle is unique. And so to just immediately say, here's what you should do, does kind of invalidate, like, you haven't even heard yet what my struggle really is, or you haven't heard what I've tried. And it makes it feel like you think their problem's really small, when to them it might be quite large. So make sure you listen to the whole story and give them what they're actually looking for before you move into like, this is a quick one, I can get them out of my office in a second. So I'll pause there again. Are there any questions that folks have at this point?
There is one in the chat about the syllabus statement and regarding reporting, required reporting, and confidential resources that are available.
Yeah, great question. I believe on Blackboard there is an example of the text that you can put in, both for counseling resources, confidential advocate, for Pioneers for Hope, and so there is a list of resources there. Darice, I don't know if you know specifically where it's listed.
No, but we can get it and maybe ask that Jessica send it out for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, great question. And it is, just as you're saying, it's great to have it in the syllabus, to highlight it the first day verbally and just say, I just want to let folks know that it's here. And then if you're in conversation or in email conversation with a student and this stuff is coming up, you can refer back to that and say, oh, remember, I just want to remind you, this is kind of my obligation, or these are the resources, these are the other folks you can talk to if you feel like you're getting into that territory. Great question. Any other things? So let's move forward to talking directly about your concerns. And this can feel a little dicey, I think, especially for faculty and staff that are not used to having conversations about, for example, safety issues like suicide, or concerns about somebody's got a black eye and they look like they're not doing well and I wonder what happened. But the best practice really is to talk directly about your concerns as opposed to tiptoeing around. Sometimes I think we're afraid of what the answer is going to be, and so we don't really ask the question. And sometimes I think we're so cautious about getting into unfamiliar territory, again, that we give the impression that we're not ready to have the conversation. So people might say something like, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? And that the student then gets the message of, A, they think that it's stupid, that I am suffering so much that I'm thinking about taking my life. And B, this person really wants me to say, oh no, I wouldn't do anything stupid, and they want to be out of this conversation. So instead, we want to be direct with our concerns so that the student knows both that we are seeing what's happening in front of us, we are concerned enough to reach out and say that we're concerned and offer some support, and we're also ready to have that conversation. We're equipped by attending workshops like this, to know what to say next and where to kind of refer them if they need more support. So to be confident to say, like, I'm just going to name some things I'm seeing and see what your reaction is and see if you need more support is really, really helpful to students in this stage. And some people worry about saying things like about suicide, for example, like, are you thinking of taking your life? Can then put it in the student's head. They weren't thinking about it before, but now that I've said this, yes, they are going to go home and do it. The truth is, as we study suicidology, that if somebody is not having those thoughts, it's not, you're not going to suggest it and force them to do it. But for those students that are thinking about suicide, their suffering is at that level, it will be such a relief to have somebody able and willing to name that with them, and able and willing to provide them some support. And so I want us to be bold to ask the question versus erring on the side of caution, not asking the question and having that regret of having somebody walk away and thinking, I'm actually not sure what's going to happen next. And I don't want to get a call tomorrow and hear that something bad happened. So I want to ask that question and not have that regret. Better to have a little awkward conversation and have a student say, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. Great, we can go on and talk about other things, but we just want to be sure and make sure that we're a campus that is checking in and taking initiative and asking those questions. So there's some examples about language you can use. I'm concerned about your behavior, the statements that you made. I wonder whether you might need some more support. Or it sounds like you've been going through a really hard time. Has it gotten to the point where you're thinking about ending your life? And we like to use language like ending your life as opposed to commit suicide. Commit is the word we use for a crime, and we don't want to add to the stigma that's already around suicide. And so to say things like ending your life or taking your life is language that's a little more mental health friendly about that. Be genuine and purposeful as you have this conversation. You don't need to get into all the details of everything if you're not a therapist who's ready to handle that. But you're just asking for concrete, like, have you ever had these thoughts? Is this something you've experienced in the past? If those are questions that you are able to ask and then take the answers and take that next step of connecting them with resources, you don't need to get into the details of every single thing. So don't just ask these questions to satisfy your own curiosity. Ask them because there's a purpose of, if you say yes, then my next step is to make sure that you know about counseling resources, and we're going to call somebody together right now. Okay. Any questions about this?
There was a question about, and I'm not sure if the answer worked out, how to provide support for a student in distress and online classes, online synchronous Zoom meetings, and the instructor is concerned about what's being posted on the discussion boards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great question. So my advice would be to address it, but address it privately between you and the student, to say, hey, I saw these posts, and maybe to copy them so that they know exactly the language that you're talking about, and just say, this made me wonder if you need more support, to email them. And if you're very concerned, maybe to say, if I don't hear back from you, or let's have a phone call, or if we don't connect about this within a certain amount of time, I'm going to go ahead and let the care team know about this, and some people are going to reach out to you, right? And Elilta said beautifully about the care team, we do accept anonymous reports. We don't, say this is the person that referred you, and so they told me to call you. But it is really helpful because students trust you and they have a relationship with you. It's really helpful for you to give them a heads up and be transparent about, I'm just going to send this to the care team and somebody might be following up with you. That makes it more likely that they're actually going to respond and not be surprised and horrified when they get a call from me or somebody else from the care team to follow up with them. Great question. And you can always reach out to consult with me, to consult with the care team, and just say, I'm concerned about this language. What should we do next? And we'll help you kind of assess and decide what next steps to take. Other questions about this? Perfect. Okay. So the next step is to connect with the student. Although, we have a lot of resources and programs on our campus for them, usually the major thing that students are looking for as they disclose these kind of situations to you is they just want to let somebody know it's happening. They want to feel not totally alone. They want to know that somebody cares about them enough to listen to their story and take some time. And so that might be all they're looking for. And so just know your power in this situation. You don't need to be a therapist. You don't need to be a case manager. You don't need to be a confidential advocate in order to provide just a listening ear to let the student know that they're important, that you see them, that you care about them, that you're noticing them, even though they're not physically in your classroom. We heard in the keynote this morning how powerful those things are. And then the next step is to connect them with resources. So usually just making sure that they're aware of the resources that are available on campus, and we'll be talking about that at length. But just reinforce that resources are there. So we talk to students at orientation, we table, we try and be as visible as we can, and yet most of the students, at least that come to counseling services, say it's because of word of mouth. Somebody told me to come. And that's what, I'd heard about it, but I wasn't sure. And then finally somebody I trusted said, hey, remember there's this thing. And that's what actually caused them to make the appointment. So being that person to say, there are some people on campus who this is their job and their expertise. I've met them and they're not scary. Those kinds of things go a long way. If there's anything that you can share about, like, I've heard from students that they've had a really positive experience at the food pantry or in counseling or with the case manager, with the confidential advocate, those recommendations go a really long way. And then you can also keep in mind resources that the student might have personally that are not on-campus resources that help them think about who are their supports in their life, who are the people off campus, on campus, in their families, in their friend system that they go to for support, because they can really be empowered to brainstorm, like, who are the people that I can reach out to about this issue. And then the last thing is to take care of yourself. So we just need to be real that we're all going through a lot right now, and each one of these interactions really impacts us. And so don't just go on to the next thing as if you're a robot and you can handle anything. Take some breaths and take some time. Take a walk, check in with yourself and say, how was that for me? And what might I need, as this heavy story sits with me. Talk with somebody else in your department or reach out and consult with us and just say, here's what I did. Is there anything else that I was missing? Just so you're not kind of worried or concerned that there's something that you didn't do. Okay. So any questions at this point about this info? Okay, perfect. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to throw something in the chat really quickly, is that we, as I mentioned this morning, we are starting a program called Wellness Ambassadors, and this is to train staff and faculty in a bunch of amazing topics that we hope that you can use in order to be a better resource for students and connect students to our resources, because we're aware that not every student is just going to walk in the pantry or walk into student health and counseling and say, here, I have an issue. They're going to talk to you first. And so we want to make sure that you are equipped as the person that they already trust to handle whatever situation it is, and then to let them know where they can go next. And so we have a bunch of workshops that we're going to be offering this year. I don't know why my caption stopped. We have a bunch of workshops where we're going to be offering this year, including this Helping Students in Distress. There's one that I was doing quite a bit this summer called Trauma-Informed Teaching Strategies. Darice has a number of trainings on becoming a H.O.P.E ambassador and helping students get connected with CalFresh. Lorriane is going to do a workshop on supporting each other, responding to sexual violence on campus. As a counseling center, we have things on suicide awareness and response called I Can Help. And one other one that I just feel like is critical for all of us right now is avoiding burnout and compassion fatigue. When we are handling so much in our own lives and from our students, how do we make sure that we're sustaining ourselves and able to keep going? So I put into the chat a survey that has a little more information and asks about scheduling, what people are interested in, what kind of little tchotchkes you would like as a thank you for participating. So please fill that out and let me know if you're interested, and we'll be in touch with the schedule for those trainings down the line.
Shauna, there's a quick question in the chat about how to proceed if a student opens up but then does not feel comfortable with the provider or anyone else.
Yes, so they don't want to go speak to anybody else. Yes, that's a great question, and that happens a lot. Again, you're the person that they trust, and so they're like, I don't know who this other person is. So I would say, I'm so glad that you're trusting me with all this. And I'm also aware this is not my area of expertise, so I can be a listening ear for you. I'll continue to, whatever you feel able to do, check in with you, whatever. But I also am aware that I don't have expertise or resources in this area. And so I really recommend that if you need more support, these are the people that you can go to. And again, you're saying things like, I know them, I've worked with them, I've heard students talk about them favorably, really goes a long way. But especially if it's an area where I don't know if I can just let this go, I really recommend that you get more support. You can even share, I feel worried about you, and I know that I'm not able to provide as much as you need. And so I really strongly recommend, that you connect with this other resource. And at that point, it's out of your hands, unless it's a student who's saying, yes, I'm going to take my life, I'm going to go home and do it right now. And that is an immediate safety issue. And UPD are the ones on our campus that can come out, assess the issue. They're actually now working with a team from Alameda County called the Community Assessment and Treatment Team. And so that is a social worker and an EMT that will come and further assess and give resources for the situation. So if there is an immediate situation like that, that's like, this is dangerous and I can't just let you go, those are the steps that we take. But if they're willing to connect, if it's not kind of at that immediate level, you can just keep saying, I know you don't want to, to, and here's what I really recommend. And we'll share some more ways to connect with all of our resources that will hopefully help them to open up and be willing to take that step. Okay. Any other questions at this stage before we go into more details about Project HOPE? Perfect. All right.
Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining an afternoon Zoom after a long day of Back to the Bay. My name is Darice Ingram, and I'm with Pioneers for Hope, and HOPE stands for Helping Our Pioneers Excel. And it's a program on campus that's really committed to addressing students' basic needs. There was a CSU study that happened and was released in 2016 that said about 1 in 5 of CSU-wide students was dealing with food insecurity, and 1 in 10 was dealing with homelessness or being unsafely housed. We know that after the pandemic, and a lot of you heard some facts in the keynote this morning, that our students and even faculty and staff are dealing with a lot post-pandemic. And East-based numbers are more closer to about the 40% students who are dealing with food insecurity, and that was pre-pandemic. So the Pioneers for Hope program has multi-pronged. We work very closely with the care team as well. We provide temporary housing for students who are unsafely housed or unhoused. We have a very limited amount of space on campus, and you'll see some pictures of that a little bit later. We have 3 on-site food pantries that help to support students, and I'll be talking how we will be doing that in a virtual space. We will be still providing food for students, but it'll just be in a different modality. And we also have an emergency intervention fund. Some of you may have even supported that, the President's Pioneer Emergency Fund and the Emergency Fund, and there were CARES dollars. So the pandemic, we were able to support about 10,000 students with the combination of both CARES funding and emergency funding. And we know that there's still a lot of need out there for students. And we are connecting students with resources in and around both the Bay Area and around the country as students have moved back home. We also host donation drives for both food and clothing, career clothing and toiletries, healthy snacks, coats, and socks for our students. It's a program that's been around since 2016, both at the Hayward campus and then launched a little bit later at the Concord campus in end of 2017. And we will still be providing services to students, of course, during the pandemic. Can we go on to the next slide? One thing that we did do as the pandemic came in, we created a resource list that we'll be updating again with resources available for students. And these were not just on-campus resources, they're external resources. We know that a lot of students were dealing with housing insecurity and how they're gonna pay with rent, how to apply for unemployment, how to get medical care or medical assistance. And so the resource list is available. One of our students was actually chosen as a National Housing Navigator. So we will be adding both a CSU-wide resource list if students live in a different service area that's near one of our sister CSUs, or if they're national. So we'll be getting access to a national service provision list that we'll be adding to this resource list. And this is available on the HOPE website that you can access and share with students and put it in your syllabus so that students are aware of it. We know that some faculty and staff may also be experiencing some changes post-COVID. So we just want to make sure that you are aware of the resources that are available. And some of those resources include things like rental assistance, food. There are food giveaways, free food giveaways in just about every city in and around the campus. And we will be doing a once a week food pop-up and food distribution, social distancing, of course, and sharing that with students that are on campus and that live near campus. And so we wanted to make sure that this resource was made available to you and that you are aware of it. Okay. One thing that we wanted to share is how do you access HOPE virtually? Over the summer, we hosted virtual HOPE hours, if you will. They're like office hours where students can pop in, ask questions, how to get access to resource. We will be bringing students back that are going to be helping us with that. You can access HOPE online. Many students were emailing hope@csueastbay.edu. We really try to connect students to services in or near their home, just to keep with the social distancing and encouraging people to continue to shelter in place or shelter near their social bubble. We also have free dining commons or meals for students who are on campus or live near campus that were part of both a donation and that we purchased. So students can actually access information in or access food in or near them. And so the dining commons are back open. They opened yesterday. I went personally to try it out. It is very socially distanced and it is available for students to access. If you have a quick question, you're welcome to reach out to me directly. And we do have emergency cash support, and a little bit about what that's going to look like this year. It is very, very limited, but we are very honored and blessed to understand that we will be receiving additional CARES dollars or CARES dollars that we can use to support students. So there will be emergency assistance through CARES dollars for those who are financially or who are eligible to apply for financial aid after census. So that will be available in September. And for those students who are not eligible to apply for financial aid, there will be some limited funds available that students can access or apply for. Now, emergency assistance is not the average, not a lot of dollars. The average was about $500. So we are really encouraging students, and students who apply for emergency assistance must access all of their available financial aid from the, if they're applying to the emergency assistance through HOPE, and that can include loans that are available to them. So we just want to make sure that students know about that. For international students, for those faculty that do support international students have very limited support. They're on a very strict visa to be in classes here at Cal State East Bay. So we will be referring students to our international department. They are eligible to apply for emergency assistance, but we do want to make sure that students are aware that there is assistance available and work with the best department that's going to best support them. And the next thing we want to talk about is CalFresh. So CalFresh is a program that helps students access money for food. You do have to income qualify for the CalFresh program, but the process is very simple. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes to apply, and about 80% of our students at Cal State East Bay are actually eligible. And students can receive $15 to $192 per month to use at a grocery store of their choosing to access any food or healthy food for the most part at their grocery store. So we are encouraging students to connect with us to apply, to learn more about it, encouraging students to talk with the professors, and professors maybe put it in their syllabus. And then as we're doing the wellness ambassador training, we'll be teaching more about that. We'll be hosting Zoom office hours and Zoom application times during U Hour this year as well, so that students can connect and access food. We do have lots of food resources. So not only on campus, Hayward, the city of Hayward does a huge distribution every week. The city of Oakland, Brentwood, Antioch, so multiple cities are doing distributions either weekly or bi-weekly to provide food to students. And so we do want to make sure that people are aware of that, in addition to CalFresh. And there was something that actually came out for those that had school-aged children that was automatically awarded called Pandemic EBT, that they did not have to qualify for if they were already in school. So that's a little bit about Pioneers for Hope, and I will move it on over. I believe Lorraine is next.
Hi, thanks everybody. So like I said earlier, my name is Lorraine. I'm the confidential advocate on campus. So what that means is it's my role to support anybody on campus who's experienced interpersonal violence. So that can include sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic and dating violence, stalking, retaliation, crimes like that. And I'm completely separate from the university. I'm actually not even a university employee. I work for an organization called BAYWAR, which is a community-based rape crisis center in Oakland. And so I operate out of there, and I am a confidential resource for people who don't want to report to the university, do want to report to the university, no matter what path somebody has taken. I'm a good resource for them. Next slide, Shauna. Great. And so just a little bit more about what I do. It can be hard to explain to students what my role is because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, like what does an advocate actually do? And the easiest way to explain it is I try to be as helpful as possible with whatever is going on. And that can look a lot of different ways depending on what that student needs. So if a student needs a supportive listening ear, I can be that. If a student needs somebody to accompany them through a reporting process, I can be that. If somebody needs referrals to other resources, I can help them find what they need. There's definitely a lot that I can do to help students get connected. And all of that is from a lens of being trauma-informed and survivor-centered. So I'm always supporting what a survivor wants to do, always supporting their self-determination to make those choices for themselves. And just a little bit more about my, the organization that I work with. So like I said earlier, BAYWAR are 32 hours a week, off campus on Wednesdays, but right now I'm off campus always. So during normal times, that is more normal. After hours, BAYWAR provides support for CSU East-based students who might experience crisis and need to talk to somebody. So there is a 24-hour hotline number there for any situations where maybe I'm not immediately available if somebody wants crisis intervention. We also have a lot of different programs. So I'm the campus advocacy coordinator, but we also have other programs like our Latinx program for Spanish-speaking survivors. We have a sexually exploited minors program, and just a lot of different other services for folks. And just some general recommendations, if you might encounter sexual assault or domestic violence with a student that you might be working with. Like Shauna said earlier, definitely you want to make it clear that you are a responsible employee, and anything that you hear about those crimes will have to be reported to the Title IX office. I would say even more so beyond the other kind of mandatory reporting requirements, for these specifically, you really want to be as clear as possible if that's something that might happen. The reason being that when people experience interpersonal violence, those really are situations that take away their power and control. And one of the most damaging things that can happen in the aftermath of that is another situation that takes away their power and control, where they're not able to make a choice about what they want to access or the help that they want to reach out to. So you definitely, as much as possible, want to empower students to be able to make that choice for themselves. Because there's a lot of reasons why a student might not want the school to know what happened to them. And those are really valid reasons. So you want to, as much as possible, respect that choice and empower them to get to the help that they need that will not make their situation any worse. And so if you sense that a student is disclosing, definitely slow down and let them know that you are required to report. They might want to report what happened to them, in which case you can have a good conversation about that. But if they don't, you've given them a heads up and an offer to connect them to resources like me that won't have that requirement. And so if you have somebody who wants to get in touch with me, one thing to mention, I support anybody on campus. So I'm a good resource for faculty members, for staff members, for students, anybody who's experienced sexual violence. And it doesn't have to be something that happened when somebody was a student at CSU East Bay. I have students who experienced something in childhood that is impacting them now and they want to talk to me about, or something that is applicable at home but isn't applicable when they're at school. Lots of different situations that I can help out with. And so this is the best way to get in touch with me, advocate@csueastbay.edu. And my office number is a good one as well. I will say my office number actually now does ring to my phone, so that will get me live, but I only check that voicemail once a day. So if I don't pick up and you leave a voicemail, I may not get back to you right away, and if you need to reach me right away, email is the best way to reach me. And after hours, if somebody's in crisis, that BayWare hotline number is also there for anybody who needs it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lorraine. Any questions for Lorraine at this point before we move on and talk about counseling? That's great.
Yep, I think I've got a question. Is that contact information we can share with students? Yep, that's my direct email and phone number for anybody that can be shared widely. And also, if somebody calls the BayWare hotline and mentions that they are a CSU East Bay student, we have an internal process to make sure that gets referred to me. If somebody doesn't mention that, they won't have any way of knowing, so that doesn't get triggered. So sometimes people call and they're like, why didn't I reach Lorraine? You do have to say that you are a CSU East Bay student to make that happen. But that's another way to get in touch if all else fails and you forget how to reach me.
Perfect. Thanks so much. All right, so let's talk a little more about counseling services. So we are the personal counseling services on campus. We are not academic counseling. And so we're for any personal concern, and we hear it all, we manage it all. We do have remote sessions available. That's obviously primarily what we're doing during this time. We want to encourage students to be connecting with us remotely and not coming to campus any more than they need to. So we have services available over Zoom and also over the phone if that's easier for students. All of our counselors are professional. They all have masters and most of them are licensed. All of our services are confidential. So just as we have been sharing, we can't share any information back to people who say, you know, I sent a student to the health center, did they make an appointment? I can't disclose that information to you. You're always able to ask the student, you know, we had talked about maybe you getting a counseling session, were you able to do that? How did that go? And then the student is empowered to share any information that they want to, but we legally can't share that information with anybody without a release. All of our services are free. I always put that in air quotes because they're free because students pay the health fee every semester that they're registered, and that covers the services we offer. And all of our services are voluntary. So that's why that question of like, what if I really think they should go and they're not willing to talk to anybody else is a tricky one. But I think Lorraine put it beautifully. We want to give students as much power as we can. And speaking from experience, when a student does not want to be in a counseling session and they're sitting across from you, not much is going to get done. So it is much more effective, both for the student personally and for the relationship that we build, if the student is choosing to be there. And I put our Instagram on there if you'd like to follow us. We have a lot of great information that comes out over social media these days. That is one of our primary ways to interact with our students. So in terms of accessing counseling, especially in this remote environment, students can schedule appointments online, and the link is here. Students can also call our main phone number, which is always being answered, or they can email if they can't find an appointment online. And so we do have crisis slots blocked every day for remote crisis appointments, just as we used to do in person. So if students want a same-day appointment, if they're not seeing things available online, please direct them to just send me an email at that or call us, and we can schedule that for them. And then after hours, when the health center phone is not being answered, we do contract with an agency called Protocol that does provide crisis phone counseling. And so students can dial our main number and dial option 2 after hours, so on the weekend or in the evenings, and still get connected to somebody who can talk them through any situation. And then Protocol sends me an email after every call from our campus, and so we're able to follow up with anybody if needed. Protocol is also a service for faculty and staff. If you have a concern about a student and you can't consult with me right away because I'm not there, you can call Protocol and just say, here's the situation, here's what I did, is there anything else that I should do? And they can consult with you in the moment. And then again, they'll send me an email and I can follow up with you if needed. And so that is most of the information that we wanted to give you. Our emails are on the slide, and I will put these slides into the Back to the Bay spreadsheet that had the links, and so you'll have access to them. If I can get access to the participant list, I will also email them out to you because I just think having them is good and having all the links is helpful. I'm going to stop my screen sharing for just a minute so I can throw some more things into the chat. But as I'm doing that, if there are more questions that you had for any of us, please feel free to ask. Nothing? Amazing. We were so thorough. All right, so I am going to throw some things into the chat. These are our Student Health and Counseling Services website. And as we talked about this morning, we are trying to be very creative with getting students wellness information online because we know that they might not come for a session. And so we have a lot of videos for self-help resources. We have a lot of links to other online apps and wellness resources. So you can check that out for yourself. You can send students there if you like. I also put the link to online appointment scheduling, our groups and workshops schedule. So in addition to individual sessions, we also offer groups and workshops throughout the week, and that's going to be a holding place for students that have similar concerns. So we have workshops about anxiety, about coping skills, forming healthy relationships. That's one that Lorriane co-leads with one of our counselors, working through grief, and also a self-care moment. And so those are going to be happening every week, and students can register for all of those online. They don't need to have a counseling appointment beforehand. They can just register straight for those groups. And that helps them also connect with other students that are having the same concerns. As I mentioned, we have a lot of self-help videos. So those are videos that our counselors recorded over the summer of just, here's a breathing exercise, or here's a wellness topic like managing grief that might be helpful. Lorriane also has a video up there that I think has been really helpful for survivors thinking about how they're doing as they're sheltering in place, sometimes with somebody who has been abusive to them. We also have a list of self-care ideas while physically distancing. I think a lot of us are at a loss because the normal things that we do to take care of ourselves are not available or working in the same way. So feel free to check that list for inspiration. Feel free to send me more ideas if you have them. We would love to continue to add to that list. So those are just a few of our many resources. I know Darice has a ton of stuff on her website and her social media as well, and things are changing all the time with basic needs. And so it's a good idea to keep up to date with that as well. Any other questions or needs that folks have? I can talk a little bit about the role of the University Police Department in 5150s. And so right now, the contract for assessing for any safety concerns, including suicidality, is with the University Police Department. Our police department works very closely with our counseling center in terms of training of how to handle those situations, and they really follow the counseling center's lead. And so when we call them, we are very much in charge of those interactions and doing that assessment. The same is true. Most of the hospitalizations that come off of our campus for mental health needs are either through the counseling center or through housing. And so they also work very closely with the staff of housing that usually have a relationship and have a really robust protocol of how to handle those situations. And then the other thing I mentioned is this partnership that they now have with Alameda County, the CAT team, Community Assessment and Treatment Team. That's a new partnership because that program just started in July, but we're really excited about that. So just looking for ways to make sure that our police department is really partnering with folks that have expertise in mental health. And I have found our University Police Department very, very open to letting those folks take the lead on those sorts of interactions and making sure that we are really student-centered in how we're handling those situations. So I know there's a lot of concern about how our police are involved in mental health right now. That's something that we're thinking about a lot as a campus. And so feel free to keep asking questions of me or the care team. But UPD is on our care team because they are a really critical resource just in terms of having access to criminal databases that might be helpful information for us as we're looking into some safety concerns about our campus. So they are a really critical partner for us. They're also the people that are able to do wellness checks if we're concerned about a student and we need somebody to go to their house and knock on the door and just say, hey, you haven't been showing up, or you said this in a chat and then you stopped showing up and we just want to make sure you're okay. And again, they are trained to have those conversations and then report back to the care team in terms of what happened in those.
Shauna, may I add something that I didn't mention earlier? Just for everyone, just to get an idea of what a student of concern, like someone, a student that may have some, maybe dealing with some issues or trauma, just kind of like how to gauge. I just included
Oops, I think you got muted again. Elilta.
Okay, thank you. I just shared it. It's under the advocacy services page, but under case management services, it just gives like a broader explanation, just something to help you. So if you are experiencing something with a student, and it could be just through an email chat or something that you see on the Blackboard, that could also help you just figure out, like, is this something that I should be watching out? If you see something like a behavioral pattern that continues to take place, then that way that'll give you a better idea of what we consider someone who's a student of concern. So it kind of breaks it down, and then and it tells you, like, who can, I mentioned it earlier before, but like who can actually make a report. So it's just a little bit more detailed information on there that you could also review on your own time.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elilta. So I know that it's 3 o'clock now, so we're done with our time. So if folks need to rush off to another session, please feel free. I'll hang out for a few minutes, and if our other presenters are able to as well, if you have any other questions, or please feel free to email us and just be in touch. But we're so grateful that you're able to participate with us. It was great to have this time with you all.